Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Zenithan, and welcome to today's video for Legends of Runeterra. Today, what are we going to be talking about today? Well, we recently had a balance patch, patch 3.19.0, I believe. This balance patch did a lot of things, buffed some older beloved cards while nerfing some very, very powerful cards, such as Seraphine. So today I'm here to help you in this balance patch. I'm here to give you 5 decks that are using some of the buffed cards that I think are all competitively viable. Maybe they'll need a little bit of fine tuning because it is basically the first day of the new set. But I think every single one of these decks has some potential behind it. And of course, you yourselves can change it up a little bit as well. This is basically just for people who are a little overwhelmed with all of the changes and just want to find something to play right away, but they also want to play with stuff that has been changed instead of just playing something older like Pantheon Varus or whatever. So, as I said, 5 decks. What is our first deck? Well, we're going to start off with nothing too crazy here. We're going to start off with a classic. We're starting off with Discard Aggro. Draven Jinx. Now, Draven Jinx only really got one new buff. Jinx, now when she levels up, she will create a super mega death rocket right away. So this is basically, if you know what you're doing, you're going to guarantee one rocket with the first Jinx. Because usually you're going to play Jinx and be able to level her up at burst or at least fast speed from things like Rummage or Get Excited. Sometimes you won't be able to. You might be like planning to play Jinx and then follow it up with like an Augmented Experimenter, but whatever. Basically, you're going to get rockets more consistently. Rockets are really good. A Decimate that has a red card basically attached to it is nuts. How good is this deck though? Pretty standard list here, I'd say. Noble Rebel is being played now over Crowd Favorite. That's the name of the card, the 4-drop, the 4-mana 2/1. Basically, they do similar jobs. They're both just sizable overwhelm units. Noble Rebel doesn't get as big as Crowd Favorite can get. I believe at its biggest, Crowd Favorite can be a 7/6, while this can only be, what, a 5/3? Which is like a slightly bigger Iron Ballista. But it still does the job of just being an annoying overwhelm unit. And your opponent has a lot of things they need to be killing. The Noble Rebel itself, Arena Battlecaster, Draven, and Jinxes as well. Not to mention all the other smaller units that are not as high priority, but will still do chip damage. The one problem I feel with the deck still is Draven still has 2 health. This deck is still really weak to Avalanche, like just AoE in general, so also Withering Wail and boxes and stuff. On the bright side, Freljord's not that great. Avalanche is not that great. Blighted Ravine's not that great. Yes, Freljord's been buffed a bit, but I don't think Avalanche decks are going to be good. But yeah, I think Discard Aggro has a very good chance to shine in this upcoming meta. The Jinx buff is just so good. There are other Jinx decks you could try, of course, as well, like Jinx Lulu, but I think Jinx Draven, basically Noxus, is just a little bit better. Being able to flood the board. Vision is really powerful. Draven's just great even after the nerf. Battlecaster helps push more damage as well. So I just think the deck is the way to go if you want to build Jinx, but Jinx Lulu has its own strengths as well, of course. Next up, what do we have next? Well, our next deck is a little bit spicier than just Discard Aggro, an old deck that has been a little bit updated. Evelyn Udyr. I've been playing this deck a little bit on ladder. Honestly, it feels fairly solid. I think my biggest problem with the deck is it needs a little bit more fine tuning, and one of the weaknesses I've been finding with this deck is it's really hard to interact with enemy units. That's always just been a problem of Freljord in general. Your interactions, what? Avalanches and Blighted Ravines, and that's only great against like swarm decks. Against stuff with more than 2 health, basically, you're kind of out of luck in trying to interact with them. So we're trying to just hit people really hard and force them to block. So to that end, we have Wild Claw's Ferocity to basically put more pressure. Same with Steam. Scar Maiden Reaver as well. We'll talk about that more. The one of Bone Club basically makes anything a threat. And of course our champs Evelyn and Udyr. Udyr and his stances giving stats and keywords like Overwhelm. But why are we playing this? What's the change? It's Spirits Unleashed. Spirits Unleashed basically giving all of your stuff +1/+1 everywhere means it will buff husks. So every husk after the first Spirits Unleashed will be a 1/2. That's a lot of stats that you're giving to whatever. Your Scar Maiden Reaver, your Udyrs. Plus they also have a +1/+1 buff as well from the Spirits Unleashed. So that's technically +2/+2 if you really think about it for a unit, which is why I like Scar Maiden Reaver. I've considered the other card, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, the 4-mana 2/4 with regen that flips and draws you a card if you plunder, basically. I kind of like Scar Maiden Reaver better than that card because Scar Maiden Reaver has Overwhelm, and we don't need to use, say, like an Udyr stance to get Overwhelmed, so it helps put pressure, and it holds Husk keywords and Husk stats really well. And of course, we have our Husk creators like Sulter, Uvora, and Evelyn. Steam also technically creates Husks too, but Steam is pretty much just here as a extra finisher. Not sure, like, my finishers are all over the place. I've got Udyr, the one of Bone Club, the Steams, and the Wild Claw Ferocities. I'm trying to figure out what top end I like the most. I like Wild Claw Ferocity being able to change things like husks into alpha Wild Claws, plus it gets the buff too, so it gets pretty solid, pretty big and scary. But yeah, this is a pretty cute deck here, using the buffed Spirits Unleashed combined with husks. Seems pretty nice. You could try to go for an even more value-oriented deck. Maybe throw in Howling Abyss too, because all the champs you will get from Howling Abyss will be buffed from Spirits Unleashed. The problem is, Spirits Unleashed is really slow. Yes, it does kind of do okay against very aggressive decks, but very aggressive decks don't really just fold to a 1 damage AoE. Plus, you're hitting yourself in the face too, which the aggro player is probably very happy about. Maybe Blighted Ravine and Avalanche could help in this deck too. That's definitely something I should consider trying in the future. But I definitely do think there is something here, but it does need some fine tuning. But I played this on the ladder and it felt pretty solid. So maybe you can take it yourself. Maybe try it as is. Maybe add a couple of cards, or maybe remove some cards you don't like, or add some cards you do like. So yeah, so I just like the synergy with Spirits Unleashed and Husk. I think it's pretty cute. Next up, what do we have though? Another spicy take here. We got Yordles. So why are we playing Yordles? First off, this is not just a Yordle deck. I really like the discard synergy with Yordles as well. Mostly because, well, Rumble is also technically a Yordle, so we might as well throw in a small discard package as well. And a lot of these Yordles, basically just Yordle Squire, create discard fodder. You could argue Paparo technically creates discard fodder as well, but I think it is actually very likely we can get a turn for Rumble here for our deck. Very, very low to the ground, very similar to discard aggro here. The weakness compared to discard aggro is we don't really have burn. That's always kind of been Vandal City Discard's weakness, is we don't really have burn, and we don't have great discard fodder compared to, say, like PNZ with their things like Jury Rigs and Flame Chompers. That's why I like playing a little bit of Noxus in this deck for the 3 of Visions. We're trying to go wide here. Vision likes it when you go wide. Spirit Portal as well. This is a card you might not see. 4 mana focus speed spell to play it. Discard 1. Grant all allies +1/+1. First off, you get the board wide buff. But more importantly, it helps activate some discard synergy, which it's pretty good. We're going very wide here, so we kind of like this. How good is this deck, though? I'm not sure. I honestly think there might be a very aggressive Yordle deck. I'm not sure how to build it, though. Like, do I want more Yordles? Do I want maybe, like, Fizz in the deck? Do I want to go the Mecha Yordle route with Rumble? Do I even want the discard package in the first place? Like, maybe I can remove the 1 Draven and 3 Visions and add in, say, PNZ and throw in, like, Get Exciteds and Mystic Shots instead. There's a lot of ways to go here, but I honestly think this is a there is potential here. Paparo is the card that was buffed. That is what's making me think there is potential. Swole Scout and Yordle Newbie were also reworked. I really don't like Yordle Newbie in all honesty, but I think you still should play Yordle Newbie just to help curve out and to get a critical mass of units on the field quickly to make your Swole Scout bigger and to make your Paparo hit more units. But yeah, we're also playing Gruff Grenadier, so we can't play too many of non-Bandle City cards, which is why we're just playing 4 Noxus cards and not anything else like a Lost Soul or something for extra discard synergy. But yeah, I think it's good. You could consider, we are playing 2 Rumbles and 2 Scrap Heaps. You could consider adding more Mecha Yordle synergy, like maybe parts of Palooza, but I feel like if we're going to do that, we'd rather just be a 3 Rumble, 2 Draven, 1 Scion kind of deck. No Teemos at all. We're really just trying to take advantage of the Yordle synergy here. So yeah, you've probably played or at least seen this kind of archetype around. Just gonna go really wide and play our go wide payoff, which for this deck is Paparo, Spirit Portal, and Vision, and try to hit them. And our reach is kind of lacking though. Like impact from things like Grenadier is our reach and Stone Stackers. You could consider adding in like Electro Harpoons too. If you add in Electro Harpoons, you might have too many discard cards and not enough discard fodder, so be careful of that if you want to add that. But yeah, pretty solid deck, I think. But there's definitely a lot of ways to build Yordles, and I encourage you to at least start with this build and experiment. Maybe you want Yordles in arms. Maybe you want different Yordle champions. Like I said earlier, Fizz. Maybe you want Tristana and go for a multi-faction kind of shenanigans there. Experiment. Have fun. And our next deck, I like this deck. I think this deck is really cute. I still don't like Shatter, but Ash Fiora. So why are we playing Ash Fiora? One card in particular is why we like Ash Fiora. Lots of cards in this deck have been buffed, but specifically Laurent Duelist. 2 mana 2/2, play Grant Challenger to an ally in hand. Who are we trying to grant Challenger? There are 2 major targets we want to grant Challenger to. Ash and Gallant Rider. Ash, you know, we give Challenger to Ash. She can always just challenge whatever she freezes to keep her safe. And of course, you know, Gallant Rider has, you know, his whole synergy would transform into Vanguard Cavalry. Technically, there's also like Honored Lord from Royal Decree 2 that we've added in here. But usually we're just using Royal Decree to give our units a buff and Challenger for the turn. Also playing a couple of Shatters. Still not a fan of Shatter, but I think it's okay as a 2 of. It is really cheap. Like 1 mana is really cheap. And while I think the removal itself is not that great because it's easy to counter, again, 1 mana is just so cheap. We saw how good cheap removal is with like cheap 1 mana removal is multiple times in the form of things like 1 mana Hate Spike, Ravenous Flock. While Shatter is not as good as those cards, even after the Hate Spike nerf, I think Shatter can find a home as like a solid 2 of in this deck. Plus this deck is kind of mana hungry. It really wants to curve out, so a nice 1 mana removal spell is solid for the deck. But yeah, also Rhymefang Wolf was buffed too, so it doesn't die to Mystic Shots, so that's pretty sweet as well. But yeah, I think this deck is pretty solid. Not sure about the top end. At the moment, the top end is basically, well, win cons really are Leveled Up Ash, Fiora, which I'm going to be honest with you, is kind of hard to get her to win the game. And then the Rhymefang packs from Rhymefang Denmother and Frozen in Fear, because they're, you know, big overwhelm units. Kind of wish there was another win con. If I were to add another win con, I would probably cut maybe the 3rd Omen Hawk for another win con. I don't think I would want the 3rd Rhymefang Denmother, maybe like a Harsh Winds or something, but as it stands now, I think this is a very, very good start to the deck. Maybe it could use a little more protection. We already have 3 Troll Chants and a Sharp Sight, but maybe some 3 Sisters, like 1 or 2 3 Sisters would help as well. Anyway, though, I think it's a very fun deck, too. Very powerful deck. People have tried Ash Fiora a lot before, but it always fell short. But now with Laurent Duelist getting reworked, Fiora being a 4/4 as well, Rhymefang just dodging a lot more removal, Brimefang Wolf, that is, and Shatter being 1 mana is just a little like cherry on top kind of thing. But I think it's a pretty solid deck. It's really fun too, so yeah. And who knows, maybe in the future with more Freljord cards it gets even better, because we still haven't seen a Freljord Darkened Weapon. A lot of Freljord decks might just be waiting for the Freljord Darkened Weapon. Speaking of Darkened Weapons, you could also consider playing Darken Aegis, Jaral, basically. Kind of fits decently in the deck. Fiora loves him, basically. And our last deck, a deck that I'm really scared of because it's really annoying to play against, but I think it might have some consistency issues, but it feels really powerful when it does go off. That is Taliyah Reaver's Row. I'm showing the mono Taliyah version. Personally, I think the Taliyah Kaisa version is a little bit better, but I think this is a little more consistent compared to Taliyah Kaisa. Taliyah Kaisa basically plays Kaisa to have a backup plan in case you don't draw Taliyah. This version, though, I think is just a little more consistent. So, for the people who don't know this deck, you don't know what we're trying to do here. Reaver's Row was buffed. What we're doing is we play Reaver's Row on 4, play Taliyah on 5, copying Reaver's Row. You will get the 1-drops because, you know, when Reaver's Row counts down, you get the 1-drops. So you should theoretically have 3 1-drops, barring your opponent doing anything, and they should be 6/3s if they were all 2/1s. Like, they will get like +4, +2 because 2 Reaver's Rows are popping, so that's +2, +1 twice, and they also get Fearsome as well. That's a lot of damage, and Taliyah, on top of that, Taliyah is also attacking as well, and maybe even leveled up from, like, you know, your Ancient Preparations, your Preservariums, and your Endless Devouts. So that's basically it. You try to, and then we also have Rite of Passages as well to get more Reaver's Rows, time in a bottle to pop Reaver Rows from Rite of Passage or just from your hand right away. Sands of Times and Quicksands and Eye of Nagakoboros to try to buy a little time while you find your combo pieces. Imagine Possibilities helps just pop the Reaver's Row that much faster. Ruinous Path for a little extra reach. There's a lot of ways to work with this deck, though. Maybe you could even add some more 1-drops. You're in Bilgewater. You could even consider adding Fizz, like 3 Fizzes or even just 2 Fizzes. I think this deck is really scary. I think its biggest problem is it does struggle against the very hyper-aggressive decks, and that's where we're playing Sands of Time to try and slow that down, and Mirai Warden to try and clog up the board. And I feel like it does have a little bit of a draw issue where sometimes it just doesn't get great draws. We try to fix that by playing draw in the form of Preservarium and Eye of Nagakoboros, and predicts to try to fix our draws like Forsaken Bakai and Ancient Preparation. So yeah, this deck is really scary. Very hard to play deck and very hard to mulligan kind of deck too, because sometimes you might not want to keep the Taliyah and Reaver's Row in your opener, and you might want to throw it away because you think your opponent might be fast enough to punish you if you do that. Sometimes you will want to keep that because it's a very powerful combo on curve, but you don't need to rush the combo. You can just like take off and do it on like instead of doing it on turn 5, you can try to do it on turn 7 on your next attack or whatever. Anyway, that is the 5 decks I will recommend to you for this new patch. There are of course more decks out there as well, and older decks that I didn't want to cover that are basically just old decks that have slightly changed. I covered one of them in the form of Discard Aggro. And there are decks that have been nerfed that I think that are still popular or strong. For example, I think Seraphine is still really good and still really powerful. Doubling spells is a really powerful ability. I just didn't want to cover and talk about those decks because they were nerfed decks. And, you know, when balance patches happen, people want to play with the buffed cards, not the nerfed cards. Anyway, though, that's going to be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to hear your opinion on these decks as well. Maybe some of them you think can be improved by changing some cards. I'd love to hear your opinion on that. I'd also love to hear what you guys have been playing since the balance patch too, because I would like some new ideas, of course. Also, if you just enjoyed the video in general, I'd love it if you could leave a like or a comment down below. Always helps me and always helps out the channel. And if you guys want to keep up with the Legends of Runeterra content, you can always go and subscribe to the channel as well. Also, if you want to watch me play some Legends of Runeterra, you can go and check me out over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Senaton, where I stream pretty much every single day. I've been playing a lot recently. I plan to play a lot more as well because of this balanced batch. I have a lot of decks I want to try out. Anyway, though, with that all said and done, thank you all once more for watching this video. And until I see you guys in the next one, bye.